It's that jumpin', yeah. This that jumpin', start like 23. Just that jumpin', 2-4 like Kobe. Just that jumpin', shoot my shot, then beat. This that jumpin', right around all of my trees. This that jumpin', start like 23. This that jumpin', 2-4 like Kobe. Just that jumpin', shoot my shot, then beat. Just that jumpin', right around all of my dreams. I be ballin' in music like Kobe. I'm the greatest to ever do it, they don't know it.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Turtles Take right here on the Undefeated Sports Network. As always, I am Andrew Tarbill. To my left is my guy, Vince Turtle Mucci. Vince, how we doing tonight, man?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
Doing well, man. It's been an interesting last couple of weeks in Chicago sports. Obviously, we got to see our Bulls fall to a detrimental end. We don't need to touch on that too much because I'm still a little bit sore over it. But tonight we got a special show lined up for you guys. We're talking nothing but the Bears tonight. We're going Bears heavy, talking about the draft. As you can see, we got the Bears draft recap logo in the background. So we're going to be talking about the picks that the Bears made and do we think they made the right moves? Do we think that there were some picks that were questionable? We'll find out a little bit later on tonight. We're going to be joined by our guy, Lester Wiltfong Jr. from Windy City Gridiron. Lester's a great football mind. You guys have seen him on the network before, and he'll surely bring some insight into these picks. But with that being said, Vince, man, Ryan Poles did exactly what he said he was going to do. Am I right? He took...
Yeah, I mean, he kind of told us beforehand what he was looking to do. He said he was looking to gain draft capital, and he did that in a big way. I mean, I think we started with 6 picks and wound up with 11. I mean, he almost doubled the amount of picks. And, you know, we saw him trade back. We saw him trade up. We saw him be very aggressive in trying to get this rebuild going for the Bears, which, you know, I know a lot of people they don't want to use that word and they're afraid of using it, but that's what they're in. They're definitely in a rebuild.
Yeah, that's the reality of the situation, right? As much as we would like to say that this team's going to be competitive this season, unfortunately, they're not. The biggest thing for this upcoming season, and I've said it before, in my opinion, is Justin Fields' development. And if we see Justin Fields make the strides that he needs to make to be a relevant and, let's say, top-tier quarterback in year 2, or he at least starts to look that he's trending that way, cuts down on the turnovers and the fumbles, the silly football decisions that rookie players tend to make, I think it's a win-win. And you got to remember, this is a revamped team under Coach Matt Eberflus. The philosophy is going to be much different. He's going to let the offensive coordinator run things the way an offensive coordinator should, and he's going to sit back and be a head coach. I think that's going to be huge for the success of Justin Fields, and I think we do see some strong progression out of Justin in year 2. I don't think he's going to have a breakout stat line by any means this upcoming season, but I think we definitely see him trend in the right direction. Would you agree, Vince?
Yeah, you know, I think we saw flashes of that last year. I think, you know, the big thing is at the end of this season, I think you just want everybody to – obviously, you're never going to get everybody to agree, but as long as the majority of – not only people in that building, but outside the building think that he's a franchise quarterback. Like that's all you want to do at the end of this year is be able to say, yes, Justin Fields is a franchise quarterback and the Chicago Bears have their quarterback of the future. Exactly. You know, obviously last year was tough with, you know, Matt Nagy's game plan or lack thereof.
Lack thereof. Yes.
You know, you never know, especially with a first-time GM, a first-time head coach, all these things. But at least what we're hearing seems to be what you'd want to hear, right? Like you don't hear the, you know, oh, well, this and that, blah, blah, blah. They don't answer your question by going off on a tangent about something completely different where you're like, he didn't even answer the question. He just skipped over it. You know, as coy or, you know, whatever you want to call it, as this previous regime was. This regime
Right.
seems to be pretty transparent. They're going to tell you exactly what it is. Ryan Poles had no problem telling everybody that his plan going into the draft was to gain more draft capital.
And that's
He
exactly
told
what he did.
Right. He told everybody, look, don't expect us to be big players in that first and second window of free agency. We're looking at that third and fourth window. So, he's
Right.
got a plan. There is a direction. It may not be the direction that all Bears fans want the team to be on. I think it's funny, our guy Allen, he's got his Bears group that we're all a part of, and you
Yep.
see in there every day, you see everybody jumping every single time somebody's released, every single time somebody wants to be traded, everything they want the Bears to
Right.
be in on everybody. And I mean, it's just not where the Bears are. Like if the
No.
Bears were one player away, then yeah, I wish they would have been on Tyreek Hill. If they were one player away, I would want them to go get this guy. If they were just a player away, I would have rather them go get Teron Matthew. It's
Right.
not where they were. They're not
No.
one player away. So, to see Ryan Poles go in and get what appears to be somebody who can play opposite Jalen Johnson and, have those bookend corners for years to come in the first round. And then he went and got a safety. And everybody's
Right.
like, oh, well, now that we have a safety, we can get rid of Eddie Jackson. First off, you're not getting rid of Eddie Jackson, not with that contract. You owe him too much money. He's going to be out part of this team. And secondly,
Right.
with a guy like Brisker back there, Eddie Jackson can go back to playing free safety, which is what he does. He's not a tackler. So, I thought they took a lot of steps forward. They did a lot of things. And when you're going through a rebuild, what do you need? You need players, right? We all talked about how they had such a few amount of players signed to this team. Well, they just added 11, and then they invited a shit ton of guys in undrafted free agents that are coming in that they're going to get a good look at too. So,
and
if
that's
nothing else, we replenish the pool of players.
Yep, and exactly. Just to allude to that, I mean, if you look at the number of undrafted free agents that they brought in, it was a big number, and it's kind of expected, right? The Bears need warm bodies to at least fill the roster into training camp. And, it's something that they talked about before, that this team needs bodies, purely players to join the team with a bunch of the departures and, the transition from the last regime to now. You knew that there was going to be a heavy emphasis on trading back, as Ryan Poles said. And that was in part to get good picks. I mean, at that position, when you're in the 5th, 6th round, if you can move back and still feel comfortable the guy you want to get is going to be there and strategically add extra picks like Poles did, that's absolutely great work by the GM. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, at what point do you stop trading back because you risk losing a good player? Well, when you're in the 5th and 6th round, a lot of those guys are questionable. I don't want to say questionable, but a lot of those guys have reasons that they're in the 5th and 6th round, right? There's one thing that scouts aren't big on or something like that. So if you can turn and, really, as Poles did, turn such a little number of picks and almost double it, that's significant in his move. So I like what Poles did in the draft. I'm excited that we got some young bodies on this team, and there's some guys that show some promise. I mean, on the offensive line side, if you go after more than 2 offensive linemen in the draft, I don't care what round it is, one of those guys is more than likely going to hit at some point. So, and
Yeah, I mean,
that
we've
was a
seen
big
before.
area of emphasis.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen before where guys being drafted in the 5th round and 4th round, and it's not as unheard of as it used to be to find guys in the deeper rounds, especially at certain positions. I heard everybody was blowing up because I was trying to be on Twitter as much as I could for the draft, and a lot of people were saying, "Oh man, they can't believe they didn't go offensive line. I can't believe they didn't go receiver." Well, the first round kind of dictated that. On Thursday we saw 10 offensive linemen go. We saw quite a few receivers go. We saw guys go earlier than we thought they would. Chris Olave going 11 overall. New Orleans trading up to 11 to take him.
Blew my mind.
Yeah,
That one
it's
blew my
just
mind.
different things, different pieces that went earlier than I'm sure the Bears thought they would. And I thought it
Right.
was a good job to not panic. They just stayed their ground. They stayed, when you see guys start to go off the board, it's really easy to be like, oh, we got to trade up. We got to trade up into the tail end of the first round to get this guy before he's gone. I thought they
Right.
did a really good job. I think the best move Poles made was staying where he was at 39. He stayed where he was.
Yeah.
He got a corner, which we needed, right? Like Jalen Johnson. And remember when we picked Jalen Johnson, everybody was like, "Oh, what a horrible pick!" And now he's the number one corner on this team. Everybody's like, "Oh, he's one of the few pieces you can build around." So I guess
Right.
my message to Bears fans is just don't be too quick to judge one way or the other, right? Like
Right.
don't fall in love with the guy at the draft, and don't fall out of love with the guy at the draft. Like let them come through camp, let them earn their spots on the team, and really see what these guys can do before we start judging polls. We really won't be able to judge him on his first draft, probably for 2 to 3 years to see
Well,
how some of these guys either do or don't pan out.
right, and that's what I was just going to allude to. New GM, first draft. Obviously, as you stated, you're not going to be able to judge this draft class at the end of year one. I mean, sure, the 2 picks that were taken in the second might be phenomenal plug-in players right away, and I surely hope they are. But the rest of these guys are going to need some time to develop. Maybe aside from Velus Jones Jr., which we can get into that a little bit more here in a few minutes, but I'm not totally sold on that pick. I mean, guy's 25 years old, but that's beside the point.
I mean, yeah, that's a big red flag. The thing is, he probably, by the time he's up for his first contract off his rookie deal, you're really wondering, is this a guy we want to stay with? Because now he's gonna be almost 30.
Right,
So, but if he's a guy that can come in, the thing the Bears don't have is they don't have that. Oh well, this guy can't get on the field because this person's in front of him.
right,
So if he can add to the return game, he's not, I don't want to say return specialist, but he's very familiar with the return game. He was very effective in college, but he also
right.
caught 800 yards last year, so it's not like he's not used in the passing game. I think they're
Yeah,
they're they're trying to build yard after catch receivers rather than those possession receivers that can get you a first down. I think they're looking for those guys that Justin Fields can get out of the pocket, can hit them, and they can do something with the ball after they get it. Every receiver they go
right,
to get looks to appear to have that about them. A lot of the picks, we saw they were special teamers, which you always. I'm tired of seeing the Bears have bad special teams. They can't cover a kick
right,
return. They can't your kick coverage, your punt coverage. So you at the end of the day, you got to have 53 good players, and this hopefully gets us in that direction. And also, there's a lot of big name receivers that they could still go target. They do still have that cap space, for whether
which
they
is
decide,
crazy,
okay,
right?
right, because they get. I mean, you can see what they're starting to build, right? Like it's
Right,
all about next off season because you're going to that off season. You're projected to go into it with one of the highest cap spaces in football.
right.
Um,
Over
really, I mean,
100 million, right?
yeah, I think they were saying 100 to 110. Obviously, some of that will be used on guys you re-sign, but you'll still have,
Right.
even if you go into free agency with 70 million, you'll be right at the top of the list. And
Yep.
then you factor, hopefully, we say this time next year, we're talking about how our franchise quarterback, Justin Fields. And if that's the case, now you're in the
Right.
territory of the Seattle with Russell Wilson and some of these teams who were able to hit well, they were able to strike well. You were on the rookie deal for your quarterback before you have to pay him. So they have the money. The team probably
Right.
isn't going to win a lot of games, so you should have a high draft pick next year. So all that, I mean, you can see how this team is trending towards that offseason rather than this
Right.
offseason. But I thought the moves he made this offseason worked too. And like we said, with the cap space, he's left himself space if they decide to go after maybe a Julio Jones or a Will Fuller, somebody who, maybe is a wild card. Julio Jones, can he stay healthy? Will Fuller, can he stay healthy? These guys, but somebody who can come in and help, who gives you a little bit of size where you don't have it in your other receivers. Maybe they go and they make, if they start winning football games or they, Justin Fields at least looks to be that franchise quarterback, Maybe a guy like Odell Beckham, who is not going to play until probably, it's best case scenario, the end of November. Maybe he waits to sign and he sees Justin Fields and he likes what the Bears got going, and maybe they throw a little bit of more money at him than other teams do, and he decides to sign. So they've allowed themselves the flexibility to do whatever it is they really want to do. They're not going to be short on anything, whether it's cap space, plans, any of. They have all of that already set, so they've
Right.
allowed themselves that freedom now as we progress.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about, right? Making smart moves, as I believe that Ryan Poles did in the offseason and in the draft. Setting the team up to be successful next offseason, as you touched on. This team's not going to be a team that wins a lot of games this season. And
Right.
I know as a Bears fan, it's not something that I want to say, but it's the reality of the situation, right? Oftentimes we set our expectation too high when it comes to what these teams are going to be. And then it makes the disappointment so much worse when we're looking at, a 7 or 8 win season, which is right about where I think the Bears will be at, is 7, 8 wins. They'll be I can't say just below 500 anymore because of the damn extra game, but realistically, I think that's right about where they'll be. I don't know what you're thinking, Vince.
They could be less than that, right? Like they could be a 5 or 6 win team. I mean, this team still has a lot of holes on it, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they, are behind the scenes saying, "Look, why sign a guy now and pay him a bunch of money for 1 year when all it's going to do is make us a little bit better and give us a worse draft pick?" Right? Like if
Right.
you can decide between having a top 5 pick and a top 10 pick, well, what are you talking about? 2 games? Well, for 2 games, I'll take 2 less wins than the top 5 pick over
Yeah,
winning 7 games instead of 5 and then having a top 10 pick.
I do understand what you're alluding to there, and I think that as much as a lot of Bears fans don't want to hear it, the reality is that this team is in rebuild mode. And, you've got a few fundamental pieces, but beyond that, you're really just trying to establish what the team's going to be and build a new identity, right? As much as Matt Nagy talked about culture in the class and the identity that they had as a football team that they never really found, you hear so many horror stories now that the guy's left. And not to segue, but obviously skipping meetings with Mitch at the end of the season and not even telling him that he was canceling the meeting. You've got your starting quarterback sitting in your office waiting for you and you no-show him. Things like that. And you've heard a lot from a lot of other players as well that, Matt Nagy's character and culture wasn't what he alluded it to be. And whether that's true or not, I just think this new regime has to come in, start fresh, and make their own footprint. And they've done a really good job of doing so up to this point, in my opinion. So,
Well, and they've stayed consistent. Like that's the key, is to be consistent. I think the Matt Nagy, Ryan Pace regime, when you look back on it, the one word that keeps coming up is inconsistent. Inconsistent on the field, inconsistent with the culture, inconsistent the way you went after players.
right.
The prime case, we've gone from having a GM that goes after injured players, who drafts players who miss their rookie year or have concerns over injuries, to a GM and a regime who has said, well, we're going to hold those medicals as important as us is to the talent. We've seen it with Larry
Right.
Ogunjobi. They decided not to bring him in after the everything that went on with his physical. And
Yep.
it's really easy to take shots at the new guy, right? Like, and to
Oh,
beat teams when they're
absolutely.
down. The Bears have been that laughing stock, so it's easy to stay that course and to keep talking about them that way. But if you look, at least as far as I know, unless I missed it, no other team in the NFL has signed Larry Ogunjobi. There
No,
were guys that they go ahead.
he was working out at a high school a few blocks away from where he lives, and they have a logo similar to the Bears. And somebody posted a picture on Twitter like, oh, he's out working out with the Bears, keeping it low
Right,
key, blah, blah. It's like, no, he's literally at a high school facility right
right.
now. Or maybe
So I
it's
mean,
a smaller college facility, but either way,
right.
he was local, close to home, working out, and of course that's part of his rehab. It's going to happen, but in this day and age, people are so quick to just, oh, he's working out with the Bears because
Man, I said earlier, this day and age, everybody's about right now. They don't take the
yeah,
time to figure things out. But like we were saying, you see, they didn't bring him in. Nobody else did. Some of the guys that they passed on in the draft that a lot of people thought would have been slam dunk guaranteed picks, but we find out there's some medical concerns, and then they wind up falling not only from the Bears, but another round to 2 rounds in some cases.
right,
So I like the difference. We feel, at least to me, it feels like I'm a fan of a professional team again. You know,
fair enough.
the class and the culture that has been talked about for so long. It's kind of like one of those things. If you're really, really good, you don't have to tell everybody you're good. Everybody already knows you
Right,
are. If you have to tell everybody you have a great culture, you don't. It's you trying to
right.
convince. Are you trying to convince them or yourself that you have good culture? So, to hear all the culture and all the good things that we hear coming out of the early pre-stage meetings and stuff like that, it at least makes you feel like, okay, maybe we finally got this thing right.
I agree. Now, before we get into breaking down the picks, we are going to bring in our guy from Windy City Gridiron. Lester Wiltfong Jr. is going to be joining us here right now. What's up, Lester? How we doing tonight, man?
Doing good, fellas. How you guys doing?
Doing well. It's been a while since we last talked. A
Yep.
lot's transpired for
Oh,
this
yeah.
Bears team. Very busy draft by Ryan Poles. High level, I just want your analysis. What do you think of the overall selections that Poles made here in year one, and specifically his ability to maneuver around those later rounds?
Yeah, I mean, that was a must. I think most Bears fans wanted trade backs and more trade backs, and he gave us 4 of them. So,
Yeah,
I mean, it's with this draft, it was a pretty overall deep draft, partly because of the COVID year. A lot of players,
right.
they took that year extra of college, so the UDFA class is a lot more talented than usual, which means that the day 3 is more talented as usual. So, he worked the system to get some picks, and what he did on day 2. That we'll have to see how those picks play out, but I'm okay with what he did. I mean, overall, I like the strategy. I'm good with most of the picks, and I just can't wait to see what happens at rookie camp this weekend.
Oh, absolutely. It's crazy to think that we're already at that point in time that rookie camp's going to be starting, man. It just seems like this offseason has really flown by, and
Yeah,
I'm excited to go back to the facility and see players practice when they start inviting people back, summertime. It's going to be interesting to see what Justin Fields' confidence looks like and just what we've seen of his mechanics thus far, even just in the voluntary camp and stuff. He's starting to look like he's releasing the ball a lot quicker. His he's changed his throwing motion just a little bit, and his footwork's improved. So I'm excited to see what he does with some of these young guys that we're bringing in, and who knows how we're going to be looking on offense, especially at the wide receiver position with all these undrafted guys they're bringing in at wide receiver. Maybe one of them makes the cut and you find a diamond in the rough. Only time will tell. But before we get too much into it, I just have to tell you, Lester, before you joined us, man, I was ripping on Matt Nagy, and I told Vince I wouldn't do it. I told him I'd stop talking about him. But the one thing that Matt Nagy did that I found rather honorable of him was he was interviewed, I believe, by Rich Eisen.
yeah.
And he talked very highly of Justin Fields and said that they have something special over there in Chicago, and was really praising the pick and the organization as well as Justin and his development. Now, Matt Nagy was trying to fit a square peg into a round hole with Justin Fields, but it's interesting and it's good to see him say positive things about Fields even after his departure, because a lot of guys could be like, well, it just didn't work between us.
I mean, if you look at it, the whole thing in hindsight, the process of the entire offseason last year was bad. I mean,
Yes.
at the time, I'm like, I understand what they're trying to do, but it was just a different situation. They never should have approached it like the Alex Smith Kansas City Chief thing. It was poor process on Matt Nagy's part. He was trying to do what he thought was right. He stuck to his guns, but there should have been some point where he just realized what he had a guy. He should have realized it a little earlier. I mean, it seemed like the injury kind of forced his hand, but then, of course, in typical Matt Nagy fashion, he would not alter his scheme very much. He kept doing his same old stuff. And, I mean, a lot of us wanted to see Matt Nagy and Pace gone the year prior. And what happened this last season is the reason why. It was basically a wasted season. And now the Bears are, going into year 2 of Justin Fields. And I think they know what they have in him, but I think it's still kind of a prove it year for him and the offense.
Yeah, I would agree. One thing that I found interesting in regards to the draft process was it came out that Justin Fields was very interested in Velus Jones Jr. And we'll get into my feelings on that pick in just a minute, but to hear the organization say, hey, this is a guy that we sat down with Justin, he went over, he said he really liked him, these are the attributes that he liked, that shows a certain level of faith in your quarterback. And that's positive to see, especially with some of the rookie mistakes that Justin Fields had over his first campaign, mainly fumbles. That's really the biggest thing that's always stuck out to me was protect the football with him. And I said it kind of in our opening act here, protect the football and protect yourself. Those are the two things that Justin Fields ultimately needs to do, and everything else will kind of piece together around it, in my opinion. But as we look at these draft picks, at number 39, the Bears go and get Kyler Gordon. Absolute monster at the cornerback position from what I've seen on tape thus far. And they really, to follow that up with the Jaquan Brisker pick, you've solidified your secondary as one of the potential best in the game with 2 moves. Agree or disagree, Lester?
I mean, eventually it could get to that point, but I mean, at the worst case scenario, the Bears have got 2 plug and play guys. They're going to go in. They're going to start from day one. So this secondary from a year ago, much improved. I mean, Kendall Vildor, Duke Shelley, Marquis Christian, Xavier Crawford. I mean, these were guys getting meaningful reps for the Bears last season in secondary.
Right.
And that changes now. So now, a lot of Bears fans were real high on a guy like Thomas Graham, which I still think he has some upside, but now Thomas Graham is not being, the Bears aren't hoping he becomes the guy. If he pans out, that's great, but not, they have some extra guys in here now. They really made an effort. I was surprised they went defense,
as was I.
But going back and look at those guys, if they were BPA at that point, kudos to Ryan Poles for sticking to his board and getting 2 guys that are going to come in. Like I said, and they should be plug and play starters.
Oh, absolutely. Vince, any thoughts on these first 2 picks?
I mean, I think when the hot names at corner, you had the Sauce Gardner and the Derek Stingley Jr. You had the top names that everybody kind of, the rest of the names just kind of grouped together. And I think people get lost. I mean, when you look at a guy that you can bring in who in 722 pass attempts didn't give up a touchdown.
Yeah.
Well, he was at Washington, a guy who played on the outside. He played in the slot. It gives you that versatility that if Thomas Graham doesn't come along, well, we already know he can play slot. So if Thomas Graham is nothing more than a slot guy, you've now covered your 3 bases, hopefully with Jalen Johnson, Gordon, and Thomas Graham. The Brisker, he's a big dude. He likes to hit. Gordon likes to hit. This team has lacked the aggressiveness on defense for a long time. Not even just the Matt Nagy regime, even before that. It's been a really long time since we had that aggressive defense here in Chicago. And I think they added 2 guys that, like Lester said, at the very least, you added 2 guys that are going to step in day one and be plug and play guys until you find the right guys. But in best case scenario, you just found them.
Yep.
And if these 2 guys, the thing I keep telling people, and I know I'm the island's getting smaller and smaller, and the water's gaining on me like you did with the Matt Nagy thing. And hopefully this has a different outcome. But the whole Eddie Jackson conversation, if Eddie Jackson can go back to playing free safety where he's just looking to take the ball away, make those highlight plays, that's what Eddie Jackson is. You know, you're an Alabama fan. He never was a tackler, not even in Alabama. So when a guy is not
No,
a
he
hitter in
wasn't.
college, he's not a tackler, to think he's going to go to the pros and all of a sudden develop that, it's very rare. So if he can go back to
Well,
doing what made him one of the best safeties in the game and one of the most exciting players to watch out of Bears defense, maybe this kind of rejuvenates him. Maybe it gives him a fresh start. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he fizzles out. But one way or another, he's going to be a part of this team. The contract is already telling you he's going to be a part of this team for right now. So hopefully these two
right.
guys give you that depth that he could go back to just doing that.
Well, I'm going to stop you right there. Yes, I am an Alabama fan. Yes, I watched Eddie Jackson play in college, obviously. And yes, I know he's a little soft on the tackling side. But there's
A
a
little.
difference. There's a difference in being a little soft on the tackling side and throwing your arms up and being like, I'm not going after that guy. And we saw way too much of that out of Eddie Jackson last year, where he was seemingly making business decisions over football decisions.
Don't forget
And
Eddie Jackson. If you go back and look at his numbers from last year, he did one of the highest tackle totals on this team. So he wasn't just out there running around. I mean, he did make plays.
Well, yeah, but who else was making plays on the defense besides Roquan and a couple other guys? Obviously, we've still got a phenomenal edge rusher who I thought would not have been here after the draft. I'm shocked to see that Robert Quinn's still a member of this team. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I think there's still time. I think, there are three natural spots to trade him. One is the draft. The other one is camp. If there's a team has an injury somewhere else, they need an edge. And then, of course, the trade deadline. I think it may work out best for the Bears if he is having another good season to kind of hold on to him, see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get a team that's pushing for a playoff spot that may think that Quinn is the missing link. So maybe you maximize the trade value by holding on to that point, and then maybe you keep him. Maybe the D could gel and he could fit in. I mean, he is under contract, I think, for 2 more years.
Yep.
And it's for the production you're getting out of him is reasonable. It sounds weird because the first year was so bad, but if he's this guy, a 10 sack guy, and he stays healthy, the production and the salary, it works out.
Oh, absolutely. I do definitely understand that perspective. For me, it's more of his value's not going to be higher approach.
Yeah.
But maybe he proves me wrong. Maybe he goes out and has another, slightly above average season. I think this past season was the best season he's going to have as a player.
At this point in his age, yeah, for sure.
But realistically, I mean, if he goes out and has a little bit better than average season this coming year and they hold on to him, as you said, you're getting your money out of him for sure. So we'll see what happens with him. Another thing that I was kind of shocked to see, and then we'll get back into the draft, was the Bears finally made the right move and let Nick Foles walk. So obviously they were talking trades. The talks were unsuccessful. Nick Foles' agent posted on Twitter that the organization had chose to let him seek opportunities on his own. Many viewed it as a classy act and kind of the right thing to do rather than hold on to him and just keep trying to trade him. I'm personally happy that Nick Foles is no longer a member of this team just for the contract and getting out from under that. You've got a competent backup, I would say, now with the acquisition of Simeon. And I think the Bears will do just fine. Hopefully, knock on wood, Justin Fields stays healthy all season and we don't need to see a backup quarterback. But other than in a kneel down capacity when we're winning the game by 14, now I'm getting ahead of myself. But
getting excited there.
Back to the original point there, Nick Foles. I'm glad to see he's not on this team anymore, and hopefully it works out for him. Wish him nothing but the best. I was one that was somewhat excited when Foles came to Chicago because I saw what he could do in Philly. Good buddy of mine's a really diehard Philadelphia Eagles fan, so I watched the Super Bowl game with him, and I saw obviously what he did to us in 2018 in the playoffs when we had the famous double doink game, of course. So as we all forget and move past that, I still have that vision in my head because I was standing damn near at the 50-yard line when it happened,
Oh,
and
geez.
still remember how cold it was, man, and the way the wind bit me that day. But anyways, guys, back into this draft class. The next pick that I think deserves a fair amount of discussion is Velus Jones Jr. So the guy's 25 years old, red flag number 1 in my opinion. He's 25 years old. He's a returner first. Had 3 different quarterbacks throw him the ball at the University of Tennessee last season. Managed to come up with 800 yards receiving and really excelled on special teams. This is a guy that almost reminds me somewhat of a Devin Hester makeup. Not that he's going to come out and perform on special teams at the level that Devin Hester did, but he's going to be a special teams first and wide receiver second type guy who you're really not going to utilize as much as a normal wide receiver, in my opinion. He's 6 foot, right? So he's not a number 1 player size. That's one of the main issues, in my opinion, moving into this season, is that unless the Bears make a move here in free agency, they don't have a true number 1. And I feel like there were better picks out there personally. I was a big fan of David Bell from Purdue. I think that he's an Allen Robinson body type guy that can go up and get 50-50 balls. I would have liked to see the Bears move on him at that spot, but it is what it is. We have Velus Jones Jr. now, and I'm kind of torn on this pick, guys. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think there's a few things with Velus that get overlooked. First off, we talked about Ryan Poles has made it very clear with some of the moves they've made that they're looking for speed at receiver. You can't,
Yes.
when you look at this draft, it's hard to find 4.31 40 speed that Velus Jones has. Also, the comparison I've heard other people make it, this isn't a shot at you, but I've heard other people make it, is that he's going to be that Devin Hester type that kind of sprinkled into receiver, but he's not really. The thing is, he played receiver at Tennessee. Devin Hester played cornerback in Miami. So it's not the same as saying, well, we're taking this guy who's never played receiver before, and we're going to throw him out there. He's a receiver who had 800 yards receiving, most of those yards after the catch. 4.31 speed is 4.31 speed. If he catches the ball and makes one guy miss, he's gone. The Bears don't have that on this team. Secondly, everyone keeps looking for a number 1 receiver. The Bears have shown everything to the point that they're going to go into the season with Darnell Mooney as the number 1 receiver. They're not going to go out and look to get a number 1 receiver. They want him to build into a number 1 receiver. And he's going to get every opportunity to do that. Was there other guys they could have picked? Yeah, you could have went other guys. But if there's certain things they're looking for, then I'm going to go ahead and give this regime the benefit of the doubt that there was something they saw in this kid, probably the 4.31 speed that they saw, that they just felt they couldn't pass on this kid.
Yeah, to counter that real quick, Vince, before we let Lester give his opinion here, the Devin Hester comparison, I guess, for me, is not that he's an unproven wide receiver. It's one that he couldn't crack the starting lineup at USC when he was there, so that's concerning to me. It tells me, and he's 25 years old, so the devil's advocate side of that tells me that there's something that other guys saw in him that made them scared of going after him, in my opinion. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he turns out to be a breakout player. And before I quit ranting here, Darnell Mooney is not a number 1 receiver. No matter how much you use him, he is not a number 1 receiver. He's too small to be a number 1.
Why? What do you that's the second time you said something about height for number 1 receiver. What does height have to do with being a number 1 receiver? If you can go get the ball and you have speed to get away from people and you make catches, you could be a number 1 receiver. It doesn't matter how tall you are. Is Tyreek Hill not a number 1 receiver?
No, Tyreek Hill's a terrific number 2.
You're out of your mind if you think he's not a number 1 receiver. You're out of your mind if you think he's not a number 1 receiver.
He's lightning fast, but again, he's small. I want a big guy that's 6'4".
So that's what you want, though. That's not. It doesn't mean that's what the Bears want. That's just what you want.
I'm being a fan right now.
I mean,
but
pretty much
go
it's
ahead,
all
Lester.
it's all like how you define number one. Is a number one like a true 6'4", DK Metcalf kind of X guy? Is that we view as a one, or is a one like a guy that is your top guy with targets? And with Mooney, he had the most targets last year. He'll probably have the most targets again this year. He may not develop into a Julio Jones type number one just because he doesn't have the kind of size, but he's still a guy that can get a bunch of targets, a bunch of yards, a bunch of catches, a bunch of touchdowns, be a guy that is a chess piece around that offense. And I think he's going to get, like Vince said, every chance to be the number one. And look, next offseason, they may go out and draft a guy that will be the eventual number one. But this
or they
season,
might go out and sign DK next offseason.
or they could go get a guy too. But this season's going to have Mooney having every chance he gets. Him and Fields have a good connection already. I think it's the receiving core is better than a lot of fans think, just because we look at it and it's Mooney. That's pretty much it. And then Pringle came over, and then of course Equanimous St. Brown is really, he's not really exciting, but I think the Bears are content because the Bears realize they got a guy in Jones now. And I'm like you guys, when the pick was made, I'm like, why the hell are they taking this guy when there's other guys on the board? But they talked about it, his traits. They drafted him with a vision for what he will bring to the offense. And I didn't realize he led all of college football last year in yards after catch. I mean, that's what he brings. I didn't
realize that either.
That's what he brings to the table. He's not just a deep guy. He's a guy that will get in the slants, the bubbles. He will catch it. He's 6 foot, 210, I think, or at least he's thick enough to where he can make guys miss and he can power through arm tackles. So I'm not expecting a lot from him. I'm not expecting him to start, but as your punt returner, your kick returner, he will be rotating in at the X spot probably. Maybe some at the slot. They're going to get him some plays, more of as a rookie, more kind of gimmicky stuff. But if he is who the Bears think he is, he'll make a difference.
No, fair enough. And thanks for bringing up that yards after catch stat, because that's something that I hadn't heard prior about Jones Jr. And I think that as much as your point there that you alluded to about a true number one receiver, I think what I want for a true number one receiver as a fan and what the Chicago Bears organization wants are two different things, right?
Yeah.
I would like to see that traditional 6'4", big bully 50-50 ball guy, but you've got Darnell Mooney and you're going to give him every opportunity to succeed. And I hope he does. You mentioned he's got a strong connection with Fields. Hopefully that just grows stronger and the chemistry there goes a long way for both of them. But I don't know. To me, it seems like when your tallest guy on offense at receivers 6'1", it's questionable in my opinion. But
I mean, it worked for Kansas City.
Kansas City also has Travis Kelce. Do we have a tight end of that makeup on our squad?
Who knows what Cole Kmet's going to turn out to be?
Fair enough. You're Mr. Optimist tonight, Vince.
Vince is all over it tonight, man. He's happy, excited. I love it.
I mean, I'm just, it's for the longest time, it's been the same bullshit every single year. And at least now, I at least feel like these guys know what they're doing when they evaluate players. And as far as number one receivers go, as long as they produce, they're a number one receiver. And we've seen guys come out of nowhere to have big years, big games, where all of a sudden they become big time targets, big time receivers that they never were thought of before. If Justin Fields takes the steps that everybody feels he's going to and becomes the guy that we think he's going to be, then why is it that Kansas City and some of these other teams get they have Mahomes, they have Rodgers, they have this guy? Why can't it turn into, because we have Fields, so he's going to make guys better? I mean, it's just, it doesn't mean it's going to happen, but at least if nothing else, we're going to know at the end of this year who Justin Fields is.
For sure.
Yeah, and that's something we touched on at the start of the show, Vince, is if you see development out of Justin Fields, this season is a win, right? It doesn't really matter. Sure, it does matter to fans how many games the team wins or loses, but at the end of the day, this team's not going to be extremely competitive next season. It's all about developing Justin Fields and seeing his stock trend upward, so to speak.
So I know we said that we were all Bears, but I'm sorry if I'm distracted. the Golden State Memphis game is not even. There's 9 minutes left still in the first quarter. It's 8-0 Memphis. Dylan Brooks just got kicked out. He got a flagrant 2. Gary Payton Jr. went up and he just shoved him out of the air, and it looked like he might have broken his arm.
Oh wow!
But he's back in the game. Peyton's in there shooting the free throws. So I don't know if he's going to stay in the game or if he's going to take these free throws so he can come back in the game later. But he just airballed that one. But yeah, it looked nasty. He put his arm down to brace himself, and it looked like it jammed at the elbow.
That's rough.
Well, basketball ended for me as soon as the Bulls broke my heart, so I'm not even watching the playoffs right now. But back to this these draft choices that the Bears have made, kind of just to move through rounds 5 through 7 at a little bit quicker pace, guys. So you take 3 offensive linemen total in rounds 5 through 7?
4 offensive linemen.
Four offensive linemen. I keep forgetting about Doug Kramer, and he's an Illinois guy.
Center,
so I don't know how I keep forgetting about him. But speaking of centers, did you see today?
Everybody saw it.
Mr. Olin Kreutz is getting a restraining order against him. And I don't want to comment on that situation, but it stems from the fact that Olin trains Sam Mustipher, from what I understand. Sam Mustipher, do you think he's going to be anything of relevance on this line next season? Or do you think one of these guys that they've gone and got are going to be the starting center and Sam Mustipher is just going to be a guy?
Yeah, I think Mustipher's, he lost his starting center job already to Patrick. He's been working in at right guard the first time they had some OTAs there. So
that's right.
He's in the mix, but honestly, Ryan Poles said he wasn't happy with the line. He went out and got, he signed a couple guys in free agency. He drafted 4 guys. He brought in 2 more guys for camp. So Mustipher's job to me is on the line here. So he has the experience. So maybe he sticks around, but honestly, the way the roster's set right now, if some of these rookies develop, I can't see Mustipher sticking around.
Fair enough. And to get back to the 4 offensive line picks that the Bears made, that's so many fans were screaming O-line last year and this year. Obviously last year you went out and got 2, at least 1 top-tier talent. I would argue that Larry Borum's going to develop into a top-tier talent. I liked what I saw out of him when healthy last season. Time will still tell. You don't really know a guy, especially on the offensive line, until after 2 or 3 seasons. But you went out and got 2 guys a little bit earlier than you did in this draft. But just to go out and get 4 bodies, 4 guys that are hungry, and you look at a guy like Doug Kramer, that guy played 4 years of football at the University of Illinois. Can either of you tell me what the University of Illinois' record was in football last year?
They probably sucked, is my guess.
I think they won like 3 games. Yeah. I don't know for sure, but that's a guy that stuck to a program for 4 years and was mean and nasty in the trenches. And I did go to a couple games at the University of Illinois and see him, and he's not a world beater by any means, but he's a Chicago area guy. He's a guy that grew up loving the Bears, and he's a guy that's going to give his best to this organization. And just with the sheer volume of 4 offensive linemen taken, if one of those pans out to be a true blue starter, I think that's a hit with as late as you were picking these guys up, right?
Yeah, you look. It's all guys in day 3. For the most part, day 3 guys are 50-50 whether they even stick to your roster. So,
right.
Like I said, this is still a bit deeper of a class. So maybe you get lucky. I like all the 4 guys they got. I like them all. I think they all are good athletes. They all play to the whistle. They fit the mentality that Ryan Poles wants. So I think, I don't think any of those guys are going to start for you as rookies, but I think they're all going to be in the mix to at least stick on the 53-man roster.
Well, and we talked about their consistency. And Lester, we talked about that before you came on. I said, if nothing else, the Ryan Pace, Matt Nagy regime, I think if you had to come up with one word, it's inconsistent. Mm-hmm. Inconsistent on the field, inconsistent the way they evaluate players, inconsistent in what type of player they're looking for. And although it's a small sample size, I think we've seen from Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus that they're very consistent on the type of player they're looking for. And when as much as we talk about receivers and speed, they're looking for the same out of their offensive line. Is they're looking for that nastiness. They want mean, nasty offensive linemen. And not only with Kramer, but I think Braxton Jones, I think he fits that mold a lot. He's a big dude. He was a first team All Sky. He's a great run blocker, which is something this team hasn't had. A guy that could just block in run, and he's comes from the zone run scheme that I think you're going to see a lot from Getsy. And he's a guy that played at left and right tackle. So, like Lester said, none of these guys probably start for you, but if you can add guys who fit that rotation and guys that can take snaps, and God forbid somebody go down, a guy could step in. It helps having guys who play multiple positions, and we see that out of all 4 offensive linemen they picked. Albeit Kramer, I think he only played center, but the other 3 all played multiple positions on the offensive line.
Right. Yeah, you definitely add some depth there. And, at this rate, you will not have to put 40, almost 41-year-old Jason Peters in when your star tackle goes down next season, hopefully. So no disrespect to what Jason Peters brought. He brought phenomenal leadership and taught the guys the fundamentals, but he had a tough time staying healthy last season, and we saw it. And now you've got a bunch of young bodies who ultimately, if any of the starters go down, as you said, Vince, you've got guys that are hungry and unproven, so to speak, that are ready to go out there and perform their best for the Bears organization and really prove that they deserve a spot on this team. So
I hate to even ask this because I've forgotten who it is because he tormented me so much, but who's the left tackle that the Bears had up until 2 years ago?
Oh, the Walrus, Charles Leno Jr.
Charles Leno, that's it. See, he's been so much out of my mind that I forgot his name. He was a 5th round draft pick, and you look what he built into. So some of these late round draft picks, it doesn't, like we talked about earlier, it doesn't more now lately than ever. Are you seeing later draft picks wind up being guys that become serviceable guys and have longer careers than in years past?
He was so serviceable that he ended Ryan Fitzpatrick's season over there in Washington.
I'm just glad he's not here anymore, but
no, I've got nothing but respect for Charles Leno as a person, but some of his blocking after he signed that big contract here in Chicago was atrocious. But moving on, other than the offensive lineman, and there was one defensive lineman taken, the other signing, and I'm not talking about the punter, guys, the other signing that kind of stuck out to me a little bit was the signing of Ebner at running back. Now, he's an interesting, dynamic player. I think he's going to be used, I don't want to say in a Tariq Cohen-esque role because he's bigger than Tariq Cohen was, but he's very much so going to be your gadget guy, the guy that swings out and catches a lot of passes out of the backfield. And he seemed to do that really at a high level in college. I was kind of surprised he was there when he was in this draft, but again, the depth and just the sheer number of guys probably pushed him down into the 6th a little bit.
Well, and you saw running backs not get picked as early as we've had in years past. You didn't have those top 10 running backs. So when the first ones get picked, but this guy, he's different than what they have. I mean, so you look at how late they got him. You've now got, obviously Montgomery went high. They traded up again, but Khalil Herbert was a 6th round pick, if I'm not mistaken. And now you add Ebner, who was picked towards the end of the draft, and he's different than what they have. Like, they went out and they got Darrington Evans, who kind of is what they already have. This kid he's 4.4 speed. He catches the ball really well. And don't be surprised if you see him line up at slot some too. With a team that doesn't have a lot of dominant receivers, it's a guy that catches the ball well and runs good routes can easily get some time as your 3rd down running back, your pass catching running back, all those things. And we've seen the Green Bay offense at times go to that pass catching running back for drives at a time. So there's no reason to think that Getsy won't bring that here to Chicago as well.
Yeah, he's definitely going to play that J.D. McKissick style role where he's the guy out of the backfield. He'll do some of the stuff that the Bears did with Cohen. he's not quite as short. He's not quite as shifty, but with him, I saw a stat as well. He was, I think, top 3 in making guys miss in college. So,
yeah,
he has some good elusiveness to his game. He has really good hands out of the backfield. He can also do kicks and punts for returns. So he's another guy. He's another guy that's a weapon to this team. And, he should be in the mix to get some playing time as a rookie.
and I think he has the speed that Ryan Pace thought Tariq Cohen had when he drafted him.
Yes.
Fair enough. Tariq Cohen, I always referred to him as Mr. East-West because it seemed like that was the only direction he could run most times. But
I like Tariq. I think he does good things. What he does them good. But he's just, when you're that small, you expect them to be fast, and he's just, you always see him get caught from behind. He just wasn't fast enough to run away from anybody.
yeah, and I think it was time for a change of scenery, and it was both mutually beneficial for him and the Bears that they parted ways, and hopefully he gets another shot to prove himself somewhere else. But with that being said, Lester, we do appreciate you jumping on with us to talk the draft here a little bit. Before we let you go, I want to know, how many games do you think this team wins next season? Give me just raw prediction.
I mean, it's real early. I mean, I think if they're 6-7, I think is a good year for them. I think, like you guys are saying, this year is about development. I mean, if the team has a worse record than a year ago, but the arrow's pointing up with Justin Fields, I think that is, as fans, that's all we really should want.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more on that.
So I got a question for Lester before we let him go.
Go ahead.
Obviously, this was the most wild and crazy offseason that we've probably seen ever in the NFL. What was the biggest, either what stands out the most to you, like the biggest move that stands out to you, or the one that surprised you the most, or, something along those lines?
I think that the drama in Green Bay was kind of the most surprising with Aaron Rodgers. The whole thing happened with him. And then, of course, he does come back. And then they trade his top receiver. That was just, I was not expecting that to happen. Then, of course, a lot of the receivers, Brown got traded, it seems like teams are more willing to kind of move on from those guys because they feel that they can find replacement level guys in the draft, which is kind of weird to say because those guys are top talents, but that seems like that's where the league is heading.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. It was one of those things we were at, it was our last, my wife and I, we bowl on Thursdays. It was our last bowling. So everyone was kind of just hanging around watching the TVs. And it was funny, the draft pick that Tennessee got when they moved AJ Brown, the player comp was AJ Brown.
AJ Brown, yeah.
So it was like they said, all right,
that.
we're going to trade AJ Brown and get another version of AJ Brown and then another pick later on. As far as the Green Bay stuff, did you happen to hear the latest? I think it was over the weekend, or might have been yesterday. I saw something. I don't know who reported it, but apparently Aaron Rodgers is now saying that when he negotiated to come back, he thought Davante Adams was coming back. When he originally said that he knew Davante was never going to play for the Packers again when he negotiated to come back.
I think it all depends. It's just him. Him trying to save face for some things, and I think.
Oh, it was on the Pat McAfee show. Sorry,
that's probably I had a feeling that's where it was. That's his show, man. He goes on. That is,
man. He always goes on.
He has to drop bombs when he's on that show because it's all about, like you guys said, he wants people to come in and see what he has to say.
I think the one that stood out to me was Denver trading for Russell Wilson.
Yeah,
they gave up a lot to get
move.
him. They better win with him because they gave a lot to get him. But I just got back from Colorado and everybody's all amped having a quarterback like that come in. So it'll definitely be an interesting year with a lot of different faces in new places.
Should be fun.
Yeah, should definitely be fun. Lester, as always, we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. You want to let everybody know real quick where they can find you?
WindyCityGridiron.com. Check us out on the site. Check us out on the podcast channel. Our video channel is actually Second City Gridiron. And then, of course, I'm on Twitter at Wiltfong JR.
Definitely a great follow. You guys do really good work over there.
Appreciate it.
And as always, man, we appreciate you getting on with us. You're always so good and so dialed into this Bears stuff that we all love so much.
Anytime, guys.
All right, Lester, have a good night, man.
Thank
we'll
you.
Talk soon. Thanks. Lester Wiltfong Jr. from Windy City Gridiron, man. excellent football mind. I can't speak highly enough about the analysis that Lester and his team give, and be sure to go over and give him a like and follow on Twitter. As he said, they do the pod as well. He does a terrific job. So be sure to
Yeah,
follow everything that those
they
guys
do
are
really good
doing.
work over there. That was one of the best relationships we developed over the other network we were at before that has definitely carried through. He's always gives us tons of time and makes a last minute
Yeah,
notice. He's able to
absolutely.
hop on with us and just does a great job.
Yeah, no, can't say enough about the relationship that we've built with Lester.
Yeah.
Phenomenal football mind. But man, Vince, things are looking up. You're more positive than I've heard you be about this Bears team in a long time, bro. We've been talking football together for a couple years now, and I don't think I've ever heard you this positive. So,
I mean, there's finally a direction, right? Like we
right.
know where we're going. Like as us Bears fans, we live and die with every game, every play, every player, every move, every transaction. And before it was just like this hodgepodge of random acts that we all had to just figure out,
Collaboration.
right? And just had to figure out what was worth even talking about and what was worth getting behind. Now, like the team has a vision, the front office has a vision, and not going to use the collaboration word, but they have the same vision. Everybody's moving towards the same point, and that for the
Yep.
first time in many many years, I feel like the team is actually moving in the right direction.
I would agree. I do think it's funny in the very first initial press conference that Poles and Coach Flus came out and were talking, they mentioned the word collaboration like once or twice.
Mhm.
Nowhere near as much as Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy did.
And you're
And
gonna by
swear,
default say it once or twice.
the Bears PR after that conference was like, here's
Don't
a
ever
list
say
of
that again.
acronyms or synonyms, I mean, that
Right.
you can use
Right.
other than
Instead
the
of
word
collaboration.
collaboration.
Right.
Because you hear them talking after the draft, they're like, we're building the teamwork and that foundation
Right.
of trust and
Right.
togetherness. It's like, I like what they're saying, but go ahead and say it. I'm not going to fault you. At least, keep it to a minimum of 5
Yeah.
collaborations per press conference and we're good.
But yeah, I mean, you see the type of players at certain positions that they're going after, and now, like
Right.
now, when they go get a guy, you're like, oh, that guy would fit what the Bears are going for. That guy would fit the Bears. And like
Yeah.
I said, they're, we saw not to compare the two because I know they're different, but we saw AK come in with the Bulls and he changed everything. And that first
Yep.
year, they said, look, we're going to lose games. Like we're going to figure this out together. We're going to figure out who we are. But I'll tell you this much: by the end of the year, we're going to know who's going to be a part of where we're going and who's part of the problem. Or who's part of the
And
solution, and who's part of the problem. And
they
I think
absolutely
they
did
did
just
that, and now
that.
I think the Bears are going to do the same thing.
Well,
It was easy to move Khalil Mack, right? Like it was easy to move him. It's a little harder to move Robert Quinn, and they're at least being patient. They were able to double their picks without giving up either of their first 2 picks. Like if you said
which
we're
is
going to wind
huge.
up with 11 picks, you figure, okay, we're either going to give up 39 or we're going to give up 48. One of those we're not going to be
Right.
able to keep if we're going to double our picks. They were able to do that, and to be able to do that, no, you're not going to get all the best players, but when you're in those rounds, are you really going to get the best players anyways? Like it comes
Probably
down to
not.
like how close do we have this guy and this other guy graded? Like if we have them both graded, let's just say a B plus or a B, we have them both at one's a B and one's a B minus. Well, if I can gain 2 more picks later on by going from a B to a B minus, I might do that. So I liked what they did. I liked the moves they made. And they're really setting themselves up for a huge offseason next year. They're going to have the cap space. They're going to have a first round draft pick, a higher first round draft pick. Who knows? They might move somebody at the deadline. They might do something and add a second first round pick. Who knows?
It's a
You just don't know. And I just feel like they've gone out, they've made the right moves, they've gone after the right people, and they have a clear vision for who this team is going to be. And I like it. I like the vision. I like, if this mentality of the offensive line that they're talking about, I pictured the Indianapolis Colts offensive line. Well, if we can get that kind of offensive line here with that mentality, it changes the game. And now you've got a
Right.
coach that's going to run the football. We know one thing for sure: we're going to run the football. Luke Getsy ran the football in Green Bay when he had Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. He's definitely going to run the football
Right.
when he's got Justin Fields at quarterback. And the Inequity St. Brown pickup, is he a world beater? No. Is he going to ever be confused with a number one receiver? No. But he's
No.
gonna know he's a guy that's gonna come in, he's gonna do his role, he's gonna do it well, and he knows this offense. He's been in it. So he can help some of these guys come along quicker by knowing the ins and outs of this offense. So I like it. I
And
think and I'm excited about Justin Fields. Like at least at this point, I'm still excited. I hope I don't
right.
ever lose that excitement behind him. Like I said, the whole Denver thing with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's 33 years old, and you see him out there, and the team's still getting excited about getting him. And guys talking about, well, I went to Denver because Russell Wilson went there. And, the Bulls, the offensive lineman, told him, look, I know you're used to getting hit. You ain't getting hit here. That's the type of guys that you look for. Those are the building blocks that you get. When Justin Fields, if he takes the steps we think he's going to, and he gets to that point, that's when guys are going to come here to play with him.
Right. And ultimately, as we've alluded so many times already, his development is our key to success. If you see success from Fields, I measure that as a successful season. So,
Absolutely. I mean, that's job one, is the improvement of Justin Fields and the identity of this offense and the way he grows into it. And I feel like if he takes those steps and he becomes the guy that we all hope he's going to be and think he's going to be, and the people in that building think he's going to be, then you're going to see where guys come here because he gives you a chance to win. When you start talking
right.
about a team where you say, well, they're always in it because of this guy, it reminds me of Deshaun Watson. Every time you talk about Houston, it's like, God, that team sucks. But you know what? They're always in it because they got that kid Watson. How many times we saw him come
Right.
back again, like New England? He come back in the fourth quarter, throw a touchdown with 28 seconds left, and Brady went down and they kicked a field goal and beat him. But it was like that moment where you're like, okay, this kid's for real. That's what we're waiting for.
Right.
We're waiting for that moment where Justin Fields has that game or that game-winning drive or something where you go, okay, this kid's for real. Like we really got something here.
I think we saw that a little bit last year in
Yep.
flashes
there was
for
definitely
sure.
flashes.
We just got to get the consistency. But one thing that really stuck out to me last season was the game against the Steelers, right?
Yeah.
You saw Fields, the team down late. You saw them rally together in the fourth quarter and come back and tie that game up. Fields playing electric in that game. That was kind of the flip the switch moment for me. Now, obviously, he still struggled with rookie mistakes at times after that game, but to me, you saw enough last season that makes you think that we're trending in the right direction. I mean, I told you before, I've never seen Soldier Field louder, including the double doink game, as I did when Justin Fields ran that touchdown in to the south end zone on 4th and 13 or whatever it was. Me and my dad were sitting in the south end zone, and my dad's a Niners fan. I've told you that. I've told the fans that many times. My dad just looked at me and he's like, holy shit, that kid's something special. And I'm like,
Yeah, I mean, we saw the flashes last year. Now this year we hope that we see more consistently. We see that, and we see the flashes throughout the year of rookie mistakes, and the rest is the
right.
solid play. I mean, and at the end of the day, it's only like he was a rookie. I mean, look at Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning threw 30 interceptions his rookie year. Like, mistakes are going to happen.
Yes.
Like, especially when you get drafted to a high team, they're picking up there for a reason because they sucked the year before. So,
Right.
so I think we're all in agreement that the number one thing we can hope for is that by the end of this year, we're like, that's the guy.
And I think we will be, but only time will tell. But it's a good time to be a Bears fan, man. It's
Absolutely.
the signs are all pointing in the right direction. And I like, the HITS acronym that Coach Flus uses, and just this, we're going to play fast, we're going to play hard.
Right.
We're not going to take any plays off.
I mean, it's the biggest cliche in football, right? We're gonna have 11 helmets run into the football. We're gonna, all those things. But at the end of the day, it's really the things you look for in a good team. Like it
Right.
sounds like one of those things you just hear all the time, but in reality, it really is the things that make up a great football team.
Absolutely. And I'm interested to see, obviously, Coach Flus is going to let the coordinators on both sides of the ball run things, but he's going to heavily influence the defensive scheme. And I'm excited to see what they do on defense, just with hearing from some of the former players of his when he was over in Indianapolis, and just, the mentality that he brought, and just kind of the way that he taught players, especially young guys, I think is going to be key to the development of this defense and the offense. I mean, just because he's a defensive minded guy doesn't mean that he can't help the offense succeed either.
Well, yeah,
Obviously, he's got a coordinator he trusts to call plays and design the schemes and everything like that, but at the end of the day, he's still going to have an influence. And he's had some really good conversations with Justin thus far that shows me that he's really interested in being equally connected on both sides of the ball. And that was something that I ripped the organization on when they went out and signed him. Immediately was like, oh, we're going and getting another defensive guy. Why are we keep going after defensive minded head coaches? Well, Matt Nagy was an offensive minded guy, and we saw how that worked out. So, maybe we're finally turning a new page here. Only time will tell, but at least we know what direction this team is heading and what to expect moving forward, which is something we really lacked with the previous regime. So,
yeah. I
again,
mean, the two big things for me is, the two takeaways from it is Matt Eberflus. Yeah, he's talked about, well, I'm going to have my coordinators, this and that. It's very much going to be his defense. His coordinator came with him from Indianapolis. They ran his defense there, so it's very much going to be the same defense we saw in Indy, which
right,
is a very hard nosed, aggressive, take risks on defense, blitz, jump routes, take the ball away, that type defense. And I thought you brought up a really good point. Just because he's a defensive coach, my time when I was with the Chicago Blitz, we had our defensive coordinator, Coach Soto. He would get with our quarterback, Tommy Kudaba, and they would talk more than he talked to the offensive coach. Who was our head
right,
coach at the time. He would talk to him about, well, when a defense goes to this, what can beat you? What can an offense do that you can't stop out of this defense? And because that knowledge that they have at running defense can help them teach the offense, okay, when a defense goes to here, this is where they're vulnerable. He can see
right,
that. And without him coordinating the defense, he will always be in that spot where he can see it and be like, hey, Luke, tell Justin, look for this when you go to this, when the defense goes to this set. Or in
right,
practice, he tells Justin, like, hey, when we see this, this is the vulnerable part. This is how you beat this defense. And that's when the
right.
team really starts to get better. When you got the head coach who's a defense guy, not only making the defense better, but making the offense better as well.
Right. And one thing that I know, I can't say I know it because I haven't seen it yet, but one thing that I hope for certain is that Justin Fields isn't sitting next to a third string quarterback being coached by him on the
Right.
sideline
We're not going to have a Chase Daniel there
as to
teaching
what he
the
did on the
quarterback.
previous drive. I mean, this team has to make Justin Fields' development a strong focus, as they have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's equally important that when we see Fields out there on the field, if he makes a mistake, that whether it's Coach Flus or Getsy or the quarterback's coach, whomever, the Bears staff should be talking that through with him. Too
Right.
often last year, we saw Matt Nagy say something to him real quick on the sideline, and then he goes and sits down next to Nick Foles and grabs an iPad. Like,
Well, yeah, because you see when he would come off at Matt Nagy, he would say, "Well, Matt Nagy now has to go back to coaching the offense or coaching, being the head coach." Well, he's also the offensive coordinator, so now you don't have that. I
right.
like this whole. Well, I'm gonna take a step back and I'm gonna coach everybody, and I'm gonna have my
Yeah.
coordinators, which is how it should be.
It's a good philosophy, and yes, it's how it should be. If you trust your coordinators on both sides of the ball, there's no reason for a head coach to call plays if he completely thoroughly trusts his offensive coordinator.
Right.
I mean,
I
offensive
agree.
coordinator's out sick, sure, the coach can step in and call plays, but it shouldn't be the other way around. And
Right.
we battled with Bill Lazor and Matt Nagy back and forth. Who's calling plays? Nobody knows. I'm not going
Right.
to talk about it. I won't comment on who's calling plays the rest of the season because I'm an idiot. Like all that bullshit. And I think if you look 3 years from now down the road, 3-4 years from now, and they're going to extend Coach Flus and Poles, I feel like those guys would be like, yeah, I signed a contract extension, not,
Right.
well, that's a private matter that, is between the McCaskey family and us. What?
Right.
Get out of here.
Right.
It's only a private matter because everybody's pissed off they signed you to another season, which was last year. So,
Right.
but out with the old, in with the new, man. It's exciting. It's a good time to be a Bears fan. It's a good time to go and follow everything that the USN Undefeated Sports Network is doing over on
Oh,
YouTube,
yeah.
Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook. Be sure to go check us out, guys. Our Twitter group is growing as well. Lots of good comments being posted up there regularly, covering a variety of sports news on Twitter. And then, of course, the Facebook group and YouTube, Twitter and Twitch are the best place to see all of our shows here live, so you can be interactive and we can throw your questions up during the show. As always, we appreciate everyone for joining us. It's been fun, Vince. Good to talk to
Definitely
you.
has. It definitely has.
Good to get back into the football swing of things, and we'll have a lot more football to talk about moving forward as rookie camp starts and things like that. Hopefully we'll be able to make it out there to at least one session at the facility in Lake Forest and go see what some of this team looks like, man, because that was me seeing Justin Fields throw footballs standing at the end of that end zone in the media area last year really helped me understand him fundamentally and mechanically. So
Yeah.
I'd like to make it out there to do so again. But
Yeah,
with that being
definitely.
said, guys, we're trending up. It's a good time to be a Bears fan. Good time to like and follow us and tell your friends about the Undefeated Sports Network. We are growing. I think we have a point to allude to there, Vince. Do we not?
I don't believe so yet.
Okay. We got more announcements to come in that area, guys. All I will say at this time is the USN team is growing, and we are proud to be able to provide you the best content in sports podcasting. So, with that being said, guys, have a good night, and we'll see you next week.